Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about the setup and wiring of the Lian Li SL-INF Wireless fans. I'm going to show you the setup of them in the system, talk about why they're wireless and why they're 2.4 gigahertz rather than truly completely wireless apart from here, talk about why you need a triple pack as a minimum in your setup, and how the reverse blade fans are useful to have as well. I'm going to show you the difference between the triple packs and the single packs of fans and what you get in each and why this is interesting and how you'd use them in your system. I'm going to show you the difference between standard and reverse blade fans and where you'd install them in your system. Reverse blade fans, for example, are generally used as intake fans but allow you to see the front of the fan still, but more on that later on. I'll leave timestamps down below so you can jump to relevant points in the video, but I'm also going to talk about the importance of the wiring and why the little black cable that you can see here, which is a SATA power adapter cable, is very important, and while you'll probably want to use that in your build, and don't lose it, and it comes with a triple pack only, so make sure you've got this to hand because it'll make life a lot easier. I'm going to show you the connections to the motherboard for the fans directly and how you plug them in and where you plug them in and why they might be problematic. I'm also going to show you the installation logic of these fans and how they set up in a couple of different cases. So you've seen the NZXT H9 Flow RGB and then Lian Li Dynamic Evo XL, and I'll leave specs of those in the description. I'm also going to show you how to install the fans onto a radiator and the logic for plugging them into certain headers and the things that you need to know about the installation of them. How, for example, there are things to bear in mind with the adapter on the end, how that can be a problem. And then I'm going to talk to you about the various different settings in L-Connect, how you can link them wirelessly in your system, and how you can then identify which fans are where, and then use that logic to basically adjust the cooling and the lighting effects throughout the system so you can make the most of the fans in a number of different ways, cooling your GPU and CPU separately, for example. So lots to get into, and I'm going to start with a reverse blade triple pack because it's really important that you get a triple pack of fans, and most people will probably want at least one set of reverse blade fans, maybe two. You might want 6 of these depending on your setup. But the triple pack comes with a lot of different things, including the all-important wireless dongle and other bits, which we'll get to in a minute. You'll notice that the fan blades and the mirrors have the protective stickers on them, which I'm removing now, but you probably want to leave till the end. Now, these are interlocking fans, which click together really easily, and you can put a group of fans together in your system like this by just locking them together and snapping them together. Most people in most builds will probably use 3 of these in different positions throughout the case. You'll see that there are little gold connectors on either end of the fan that you need to line up and basically slot in carefully there, putting the little notches in place and then sliding them into place like that. They lock together really easily, and then there's just one connector that connects on either end of a fan that allows you to then plug in this group of fans. You'll see that this connector also doubles as a wireless receiver and transmitter system, but it does have 2 connectors on it. I'll show you where those plug in a minute. The little connector basically lines up on one edge of the fan and then slots into place and basically clicks in. You'll see you need to push it in a certain direction to secure it. Now, the other interesting thing of note here is that this little receiver, there's a cap on top of it which you can pop off. Once you do that, you'll see that you can adjust the position of the fan cable. Now, this can be useful because depending on how you're installing these fans in your system, you might find that this cable's facing the wrong direction. So you can then adjust the cabling and make it point towards the way you want it to, i.e. towards the back of the case, so you can then hide it away at the back, minimizing the amount of visible cable in your build and neatening things up. This is pretty handy, as you'll see me do it here, where I go to install these fans on the radiator, and I realize that the cabling is actually on the right-hand side and would be going in the wrong direction. I want it going towards the left so that I can then put it through towards the back and hide it away in the case and make things a little bit neater. So with a bit of adjustment and some quick finger work, you can then basically do that. You can also tie that cable around that top receiver and hide some of it away inside the thing itself, but I personally don't like that. I'd rather hide it away using the case itself rather than trying to tie it up inside it. Now, with this receiver, you'll find that when you go to install it on a radiator, you might find that it pushes up against the tubes. I'm using Lian Li's Hydroshift as a demo here. Obviously, this is no good because it's pushing against the housing of the cooler. But you can flip it around the other way and obviously have that housing on the outside instead. The other thing to bear in mind is that you can also twist off the clips. So when you get to the end of the fan group, these clips that would hold extra fans in there can be twisted and pulled out, so you can remove them and neaten up the build and get these out of the way in case they're pushing up against anything on a radiator, for example. That makes the installation a lot easier and neater and is another nice little feature of the fans. You can see now that these will sit easily on there and the housing for the cooler will go back in place quite easily. And then you just have the fan wiring to sort out and obviously the wiring for the cooler as well. And I'll talk a bit about that later as well. But for the basic wiring of the fans, once you've got a group of fans here, you'll see we've got 3 fans. We have 2 connectors that need to be plugged in. So I've shown you already there are 2 connectors on the cable, as you can see here. One of them has 4 cables in it and one has 2. Now, both these cables, especially if you've got a group of 3 or more fans, need to be plugged into either a system fan header or a chassis fan header on your motherboard. You'll see them marked sys fan or CHA fan, and you should find multiple of them at the bottom of the motherboard. Some are at the top, some maybe down the side in different locations. You need to plug in both of these cables if you've got lots of fans. If you've only got one, you can probably get away with plugging in the 4 cable connector. If you've got a group of 3 fans or more, you need to plug in both. And that's because obviously all the lighting and the fan power that's drawn from these basically require 2 connectors on there. So you need to find enough connectors to be able to plug these in. That obviously, as you can see, takes up 2 connectors for this group. And then if we've got another group of fans that are adding into that, so another 3 that are adding into the system, we then need another 2 connectors on there. What you'll find, unfortunately, is that you'll quickly run out of connectors on your motherboard. Chances are you might only have 6 maximum, maybe even less than that, depending on your motherboard. So it could be a problem. Now, a quick note is if you are connecting them directly to the motherboard, I recommend going into the BIOS by pressing delete as you turn your PC on. Then head over to the fan control section on your motherboard, which you can see is a smart fan setup on this Gigabyte board. And then look for any of the fan headers in the system that you've connected to with these fans. And what you want to do is basically set it in the fan control mode to PWM mode. This will ensure that the fan is getting enough power and can be controlled from the BIOS in terms of fan speed and things, but more importantly that group of fans is getting enough power through to it to run properly. If you don't do this, you might find you have other issues, like you can see this rear fan, for example, doesn't match in terms of the RGB lighting with the rest of the case fans. The alternative to this is to use that all-important cable I mentioned earlier on, which is the SATA power adapter. So this is a cable that you can use to connect up the fans. This is important if you've got a group of 3 or more fans. So you see you can add 4 fans, for example, into a system if you want to in a group. You need to basically plug your group of fans into this. So you can put 3 fans into that, use the 4 cable connector, plug it into this adapter, and basically that will ensure that the group of fans gets enough power. This is powering the fans from the power supply unit directly rather than from the motherboard. This is preferable because it ensures the group of fans gets enough power. Now, if you don't know already, this is a SATA power connector, which is the same power cable that you'd use for your SSDs and hard disk drives. On the Corsair RM-Shift that I'm using as a demonstration purposes here, this cable has a connector that plugs into the power supply unit on the SATA and PATA ports on the power supply end, and then it has a cable with multiple connectors on it that you can use for SSDs and hard disk drives and easily connect those up. You can connect multiple devices to the same cable with relative ease, especially drives like this because they draw a very small amount of power, or you can use it in this instance to plug in this adapter. So this adapter is plugged into one of those connectors. It'll only plug in one way, but then it'll ensure the group of fans get enough power. The benefit of this is obviously that this cable can also be hidden away at the rear, and all the fan cables then go to the back and don't need to plug into the motherboard, so it's a lot neater. Now, the other thing that you want to get a triple pack for is the wireless dongle. This is the 2.4 gigahertz wireless adapter. This allows you to control the fans via L-Connect. So it is essential. You can buy it separately, but you won't get it with a single pack. You can only get it with a triple pack. So make sure you've got at least one triple pack. This dongle will plug into the back of the motherboard into a USB port and then allow you to control the fans that way. Or the alternative to that is to use the little adapter cable that comes with a triple pack, plug that into the end of the USB dongle, and then you have two cables coming out of that. Now this requires a system fan header and a USB connection, so yes, another system fan header, which is why that SATA power connection is so important. But the USB connection is obviously important so that the wireless dongle can be seen by your PC and then use L-Connect to then control things. You should find you have two USB ports as a minimum, hopefully, at the bottom of your motherboard in the middle. There are alternatives if you haven't got enough USB ports. I'll link to a video I did on that separately in the description. But you plug that USB cable into there, connect that up, and that will ensure you have that connector. And then you also need to make sure you've got a system fan header to power the thing. The advantage of doing this is that you can then hide the wireless dongle at the back. You're not losing a port on your motherboard, so you can neaten things up and obviously not waste space that you might use for a headset, mouse, keyboard, and other things. Now, with the single pack of fans, the single reverse blade or standard blade fans, this is what you get. You get the fan, you get the fan screws, and you get the wireless transmitter cable that connects up to the end. Obviously, if you get 3 packs, you get 3 of these cables, which is probably unnecessary. So you're going to end up with spares like this because you're not going to need this if you're putting those 3 fans together into a group and then sticking them on a radiator, for example. But it's something to keep in mind. That's why you need a triple pack. Now, with the installation of the fans onto a radiator, there are a few other things to bear in mind. We obviously have screw covers over the screw holes, both on the front and back of the fans. You'll need to remove these before you secure the fans, whether you're installing them on a rad or in the case. Do take care when installing here, because what I've found is it's really easy to mark with your screwdriver or with the screws the rubber surrounds on these points. And you don't want loads of marks on what is otherwise neat fans. But you use your radiator screws to secure the fans to the radiator, and then you can put those rubber covers back over to hide the screws away. Makes things nice and neat and tidy. If you're installing the fans on the case, obviously you only need to remove the bit that's going to screw into the case, so the rubber bits on the back of those screw holes, in this instance, for example. When it comes to the logic of standard and reverse blade generally install on the side and on the bottom. Reverse blade basically have blades facing in different directions so they can work as intake fans pulling air through. So this means that you can still see the mirrors and the fan blades when installed in your case. This makes them much more aesthetically pleasing. Now, when you're installing them on the radiator, as I am here as intake, the other thing to bear in mind is the wiring of the fans. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the wiring of these SL fans and I'm running them through to the CPU fan header. I use CPU fan and CPU optional. The 4-pin cable goes into the CPU fan connector and the other one is CPU optional. That ensures that the motherboard can see the fans on the system and the BIOS doesn't complain about it. Now, I use this logic both with the NZXT cooler that I'm using there and with the Lian LI's Hydroshift cooler that you see here. Essentially, plugging them into this header allows the BIOS to recognize that we've got fans on the system and also to control the fan speed, but also not complain about what's going on there. And it's a logical sort of wiring for that. And then the pump would plug into the AIO pump header on the motherboard as an option. And then we get into L-Connect. I want to show you a number of different things to bear in mind with the settings here. Download the latest version of L-Connect, which might well be advanced from what you're seeing here in this video because there'll be newer versions. Then go into the sync setup section. In there, you'll see a broken chain. Click on that and it will link each of the different devices in your system and connect them up to the wireless dongle so they can then be controlled. You'll also see that there's a little light icon on the right-hand side with Identify next to it. If you click on those, you'll see the group of fans will then light up yellow, so you can easily see at a glance which group is which as you identify through the ones you've linked. Now, you can link and unlink fans to basically put them in the right order throughout the case, but doing this allows you to identify which group is where, so that you can then set the logic of the fan profile. So you'll see from down the bottom here that you can choose between CPU and GPU. You can set the fan profile to quiet, standard, high speed, and full speed. You can apply it to all the fans. But if you identify the fans that are on the radiator, for example, you can set them to adjust temperature based on the CPU temperature. And the other fans on the system, for example, the ones below the graphics card, you might want to set to respond to the GPU temperature instead. This will allow the fans to adjust logically depending on the temperature of your important components in the system. So using that identify logic basically allows you to work out which is which and how to program them. Now, you can go into the wireless utility and adjust the RGB lighting, and I'll show you more of this in a second. And you can see that you can individually adjust each of the groups like this and do other things, including speed, brightness, and individual parts. But I like the quick sync lighting section, where you have less lighting effect options, but you can use this to apply to all the devices in your system, including the wireless strimers if you're using them, for example. You can select a lighting effect in here, change the brightness and speed, and then click apply, and it'll basically apply to all the fans in the system and any other Lian Li devices you've got in here. I've got a 3-pin wireless strimmer in the system, for example, and you can see the lighting effect going across each of these in sequence, and it looks really clean this way and is really nice. So it's possible from L-Connect to change the lighting from various different things. So you can see it's set to rainbow under the wireless utility section for this group of fans. But if you look at the drop down here, you'll see that you can adjust basically lots of different parts of the fan. So in this top selection here, it's basically selecting the middle infinity blade, the outside edge of the fan, and then the very sides. So basically this is the center, the outer edge, or the thing itself. So you can select these individually and then adjust them. So if you wanted to, for example, we could set the middle to a specific color. So just for demo purposes, if I set the center to blue, so you can see now the blades and the infinity mirror in the middle are now blue, but the outside is still set to rainbow and the mirror down the edge as well. So if we take the edge lighting and we'll change that to red, this is just for demo, obviously you can apply anything to it. What you'll see is there's now red down the infinity part of it in the middle. So this is actually the middle of the dual layer of the infinity mirror. And then you can change the other part as well. So we could put green there. And then that's the outer edge of that part. So this is essentially the outer part of the fan and the outer part of the infinity mirror on the outside of it. Now, obviously, you can see there are a lot of different selections in here. But the other thing you could do, perhaps, if you wanted to, is you could drop the brightness down and turn off those sections. So you can see now we've only got one part of the outer infinity mirror and lit up and the inner fan blade. So you can change that. And then, obviously, you could apply different effects as well to the blades or to those edges. So if we select the fan blades, we could change a different effect in there. Completely different to what's going on with the mirrors. And then the infinity mirror is still red, so we could change that to something else. And I mean, that is probably a bit too intense, but it shows you the options you have, that you could turn off bits of it and adjust the brightness levels completely, so you can make that completely dark. Now we've essentially just got the mirror and the fan blades lit up, and then you can go through different effects in there. Or obviously, if you prefer, you can just select the entirety of it and pick something from there. I quite like Runaway, for example. Do a blue and a pink. Then you have this one that passes between the various different fan blades and the parts of the fan, and it's applying to all. So when you click apply to all, it applies to every group of fans in the system. So lots of different options in terms of lighting and what you can do with it. You can adjust the speed, the brightness, and all sorts from here. So hopefully I've given you some interesting insights into how to set up the fans, the wiring logic of them, how to tweak them and other things. And don't forget to check out the links in the description to find out more. I've got related videos that might be useful if you need it, for example, on the USB connections. But if I've helped you out, subscribe please to help me out in return, or let me know in the comments what you think. And thanks very much for watching. Enjoy the new fans because they are really awesome. Thanks.
You've made it right to the end of the video, you brilliant legend you. If you've enjoyed it, click that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and drop me a comment down below if you've got any questions. If you really enjoyed it, consider joining the channel and see the benefits of doing so. Check out these other videos, you might well find them interesting or useful, and most importantly, have a great life.